Ayo, what's poppin', brothers? So, after the last video I did, where I talked about the Ultramarines and I sucked them off for a solid 28 minutes, decided to look at other lore topics about Warhammer that I could blabber on about for a significant period of time, because I don't walk outside very much, and I really need to get friends. Anyways, so I decided to start talking about a topic that was interesting for me. If you guys haven't seen my Instagram, you can go take a look at it. It's pretty cool. I upload some pretty cool shit there. But I had been working on a small Minotaurs force. If you guys don't know who the Minotaurs are, they're featured heavily in the Badab War series. I've been reading everything to get my hands on about the Badab War, because I'm a Warhammer nerd. There's one character that keeps on appearing in the Badab War. I found this time period in Warhammer to be fascinating, personally, because I started with the 8th edition of Warhammer40k. It was quite different to looking back at an older edition of 40k, and frankly, you don't really see much of the Badab War come back up, but Huron keeps on coming up in these stories during the Badab War era. And there's something particularly strange with his character that I kept on noticing and I just couldn't get out of my head, so I need to make a video on it. What this strange effect, you might ask, or effect? What strange effect this might be? Well, it's time to talk your ear off. Obviously, the Badab War is a massive part of Huron's origin story. However, it also has significance in Warhammer, both in a meta sense and in a canon sense. In general, in recent years, it's really become a footnote. However, the Badab War predates a lot of lore as we know it. All the way back in Rogue Trader, there was not many factions compared to what we have nowadays, and a lot of those factions' rosters were very small compared to the fleshed out ones we have today. So frequently, you would have Space Marine versus Space Marine game. This is why Games Workshop came up with the idea to have the Badab War. It justified a Space Marine versus Space Marine game, and released it in White Dwarf 101 in 1988. This version of the story is a measly 3 pages that includes all the fluff for the Badab War. Now, to give this story some credit, this would be the inspiration for the whole Horus Heresy storyline. Now, because it was only 3 pages, the story that we got in this version that came in 1988 was vastly different than what we would get in later years. The first iteration of the Badab War was drastically different. According to this White Dwarf article, Huron was referred to as Huron, not Huron Blackheart, and Huron was the chapter master of the Tiger Claws that attacked the Imperial Inquisition's shipping fleet for not turning in their gene seed. And the Tiger Claws were massively famous for not turning in their gene seed. Now, it's never specified why they never turned in their gene seed, or if they turned in their gene seed and it was lost. The article is not concerned with that. What it is concerned with is detailing the Tiger Claws chapter master Huron and painting him in a very critical light, describing him as ambitious and power-hungry, saying things like he should have never risen to prominence within the Space Marine chapter. Hell, it even jokes around the idea that he's a shape-shifting space magic wizard person that's evil. So, Saturday morning cartoon stuff is essentially what Huron is at this point in time, being evil for no set reason or goal. However, this would rapidly change in following years, as most other things do in canon from 2nd edition. Wow, we can't really get away from the similarities between the Badab War and the Horus Heresy. Throughout the years, stuff would be added and changed from the Badab War by different authors depending on which media we are looking at. Examples of this is the Tiger Claws becoming the Astro Claws and lufgt losing an arm at the final battle. Even the addition to them being added to Chaos was only added later on, not in the original story. To be fair, since 2nd edition, when they released the first Chaos Codex, they were in there. However, it was described as being played more as renegade forces instead of being strict chaos forces. That's why they weren't aligned to a god, because they didn't serve the gods, they were merely pirates that ran away and disagreed with the Imperium. However, quickly we find already in the 3rd edition codex that the Red Corsairs had been changed to being directly working for Chaos. However, honestly, that's not important that much, because depending on which part of the lore you were reading at that time, you would get a completely different story of who and what is Huron Blackheart and the Red Corsairs, because it's scattered between different books and each writer had their own interpretation of what was happening, almost similar to another character we know about that might come up later in the video. Or at least, this was our reality until Forge World stepped up. If you guys don't know what Forge World is a subsidiary company from Games Workshop that produces higher-end limited prints of unique miniature. Unless you've been into the hobby for a hot minute, you wouldn't know that they actually produce rules and lore for Warhammer. Wow, another parallel between the Badab War and the Horus Heresy. This is really getting to be too much of a Twilight Zone moment for me. However, back in 2007 and 8, Forge World had not touched any of the pre-existing lore yet. Now, for those who aren't baptized in Mountain Dew and take at least a shower once a day, or flat out just too young to know about Warhammer 5th edition like myself, it was apparently, according to the internet, a bit of a mess. According to the internet, 5th edition was one of the most broken and unfun games to play. That is until 9th edition, but I'm not even going to touch that subject with a 10-foot pole, Mr. Grinch. The saving grace of 5th edition was the Imperial Armor series. Stories like the Siege of Rax and the Badab War were loved by the fans. Even Warhammer content creators to this day are making videos on these subjects. It still sees a lot of love from the community. This is all thanks to Forge World, and more specifically, the late, great Alan Blott.
Because of his and the work of Forge World,
They took a simple Saturday morning cartoon villain and the setting of the Badab War, giving it gravitas, love, and care, turning this black and white story into a fully realized conflict. Due to the hard work and dedication, Forge World was able to take 3 pages of lore and turn it into 2 massive tomes of work. This is why I'm going to hyper-focus at the beginning of the war and end of the war, and try to hit as many points in the middle as I can, but there's just honestly too much for me to cover. And many have done far better videos than I ever could about the topic. I'm going to focus on the Warden chapters, specifically the Astral Claws, the ones that go renegade, because of a lawsuit and a madman. See, in Forge World's telling of this story, the big theme is that the Imperium is its own worst enemy because of its bureaucracy, which is necessary to keep itself in check. The story begins with the Tiger Claws again, but this time it's a little different. The Tiger Claws in this iteration of the story are successors of the Astral Claws, which, when they go back to the Inquisition to rebuild their chapter, somehow their chapter master disappeared. So all their gene seed and all the Tiger Claws are reabsorbed into the Astro Claw as a way to make sure the Inquisition will stop going after them. An act of kindness that would lead them down a very dark path. And to add a bit more context here, the Astral Claws are one of the most esteemed chapters, even serving in the Black Crusades stopping Abaddon, specifically the 5th one. To understand the Warden chapter's job, they had to guard the Eye of Terror Jr. It's called the Maelstrom. but it operates basically like an Eye of Terror Junior because it's a giant warp storm. They were given 4 chapters, plus PDF forces, and a sizable Imperial Navy fleet to back them up. However, as time goes on, more and more resources are pulled away from the Wardens to be used elsewhere, even removing one of the Space Marine chapters, causing them to go from 4 chapters to 3 chapters, which made them less effective. Because they were less effective, the Inquisition decided to turn in their job performance sheet that week, and it was covered in red ink. So what do? What any rational person would do. They take over the whole Badab subsector, overthrow the leaders, killing them, and then rule over the Badab sector with a draconian fist, supported by the Mantis Warriors and the Lamenters. Now, dear viewers, that might throw up some red flags, but honestly it doesn't. This is 40k. Stuff like this happens all the time, and it's quite normal for them to do this. The Imperium does not really care unless they pay their taxes, which the Astral Claws paid, right? Right? Wait, they paid their taxes, right? Now you might ask, why poke a sleeping bear like this? Well, brother, see, it's pretty simple. The Astro Claws are basically playing a game of tug-of-war. Every time they're about to win, a team member is taken off their team, so they have to start all over again. However, with how annoying this might sound, you have to understand the others that are having their own tug-of-war game need that resource to make sure the Imperium does not collapse. Specifically, their neighboring subsectors that needed those resources for their economy not to collapse. Additionally, the first motivation from the original story stays in here. They stop turning in their gene seed. However, the reasoning this time around is slightly different. Unlike the original story, this story starts out with a legal dispute
of the Astral Claws versus neighboring sectors.
Now, the Astral Claws will justify what they're doing with the ancient rights set by the Emperor of Astartes commanders being able to take what they need to help protect the Imperium. However, the local sectors are saying he's not paying his taxes, therefore hurting us all. And you know how the IRS gets about people who are not paying their taxes. You better pay your taxes, fuckboy, or you're gonna have the IRS on your ass. And that's why they start to lose this case. You have to understand right now, this has gone from a legal dispute to a sector war. So it was very hard for the Inquisition to pick a side, because they didn't really know who was right in this situation. However, it was easy for the Astro Claws to pick a side, and they immediately started attacking innocent ships, stealing resources, and locking down the Badab sector with a draconian fist. Due to this view from the Inquisition of it being just a civil war, they were kind of fighting with one hand behind their back throughout most of the war. Because to them, they were just dealing with a disagreement. You know, this was just a disagreement by two parties. It happens in Warhammer. However, to the Astral Claws, this was a revolution. They were changing everything. They were going to take the war back to chaos and run into the Eye of Terror. But this all changed for the Inquisition when it was revealed to them that the Astral Claws had been breaking the rules. Not only did they have more than 1,000 Marines, they were pushing 4,000 Marines. They had completely converted the PDF forces into a wing of their own chapter, and then additionally were using virus bombs and other abhorrent form of weaponry to continue to hold the sector. This would be the final nail in the coffin that allowed the Inquisition to see this was a revolution and they needed to step up. And we see this when certain chapters are dismissed from this war and replaced with chapters like the Carcharodons and the Minotaurs, as the war turns from trying to reclaim the sector and making peace to an all-out war with no hold bars, willing to do anything to win. However, once they started seeing at least one squad of Astral Claws at every single battlefield and they ran the numbers, they realized that they had way over the amount of Space Marines they should have had, compounded by the fact they were taking everybody's gene seed. Honestly, the most important battle of the Badab War is the last leg of the Badab War, when we get into the Badab Sector and Badab Prime. Because before all this, the Inquisition are fighting the Mantis Warriors and the Lamenters. After this, the only one that's holding the line left is the Astral Claws. For this video, we're going to be focusing on them. Of course, the battle would first start between Lamenters and Mantis Warriors. This would be the first 4 years of the war, dealing with them, swapping in and out chapters. A lot of the original chapters did not be deemed strict enough for what they needed to do in this battle to truly push through. This is also when many worlds, like Forge Worlds, joined in. Huron had his own Forge World join in the fight. However, as each subsector fell, it gradually left the Badab sector with only one left. To give you an idea how big the fighting was in this last leg of the fight, Titan legions were deployed. The fortress of the Badab had to be completely destroyed by a 3-pronged attack by 6 chapters. It's rumored that Badab Prime, the capital world of Badab system, could rival Cadia's defenses. In the last days of the war on Badab Prime, the Loyalists were able to get to the engine rooms of the planet and hypercharge them, creating essentially a black hole that would make the planet collapse on itself. During this time, we see the final stand of the Tyrant of Badab versus a captain of the Star Phantom. Now this might come across as a sissy Black Legion boy throwing salt, however that's not really what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to genuinely answer this question. What has Huron achieved? Okay, take a moment and think about it. Okay, good. There's a few things I can think of. When I say that, I mean things that I've seen on YouTube and the internet, but one thing keeps coming up. It's the Badab War. There are other things, but we honestly need to look at this, and we need to face the fact that he lost. Now, I couldn't find an exact word for this. I tried looking at a confirmation bias, and the definition wouldn't fit. I tried looking at framing thinking, and that hits close, but it's not exactly it. What often happens when people are summarizing stories, especially when they're biased against certain sides, they're going to explain something very simply, such as Huron Blackheart held off the Imperium for 9 years. My main point here is somehow that we've gotten it into our heads that Huron was somehow the underdog in this whole event, when he truly wasn't. I will touch on it later in the video, but it all comes down to how we frame the story and how the information is provided to us. Well, get to the bloody fucking point here, mate! Well, I'm getting there. This is important to fully understand. This is why I think it's so important, because a lot of storytelling is just based on psychology. And oftentimes people are very subjective when they look at things. So when we look at the Badab War, we have to start looking at it objectively. Many people believe he's a tactical genius, will argue that he was able to hold out against a greater force for a significant period of time. This is kind of understandable. It's an easy way to explain the issue, because if you think about it, it's sorta true. However, if you really dive in depth into the numbers of troops on each side, on when they come in, when they don't, you realize that Huron has a lot more tactical advantage than people give him credit for. What I mean by this is the cards are very much stacked in his favor. Every time you're taking a fixed position, you're going to be fighting a ratio of 1 to 3 odds at the lowest.
However, because of doubled my medication and running in 4 Monster Energy drinks, I have ran all the numbers that I could find. This is probably not very healthy.
I used a plethora of sources to try to corroborate, to put together a list of the most accurate numbers of forces that are in the Badab War. Why? I don't know. I don't get out enough. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a lot of things. I need help. Please send help. So pull up a chair class, we're going through this, because I wasted too much time in this, and I've probably failed a few tests. Anyways, after you count up here, you can see there's 12 chapters of Space Marines that work for the Inquisition, backed up by the Astra Militarum. Well, then let's look on Huron's forces. I mean, there's only 5 chapters to Tyrant's Legion and a battle fleet. Now, when I put it like this, in short style, you can clearly see what they're saying. I mean, obviously I am wrong. Now let's take you know what, just for shits and giggles, let's take a little bit more look at this information. In this, you can see that the Astral Claws were pushing 3,000 to 4,000, which is equivalent to almost 4 chapters alone. And then he's backed up by 3 more full chapters, plus a Forge World, plus he's ruling over this subsector, so all the resources are going to him, versus the Inquisition troop, which altogether make up 12 chapters backed up by technical support. But this is a crucial point to understand. Not all 12 of these chapters continued to be in the war zone at the same time. I've gone through and highlighted and dated when each one comes in and leaves the war. As you can see, it's really more about 6 chapters in each segment of the war. That tracks when they find out that the Gene Seed had been taken, ending up around the Battle of Badab Prime with 4,000 Marines attacking that world. Very close to that beginning number that's very equal. Now, there might be an argument for a double standard of how I'm comparing these two forces. However, my argument, if he was a masterful commander, he shouldn't be put in that position. Second, couldn't calculate, and what's not given to us in any information is how many of the Tyrant's Legion were converted into Space Marines by the end. Because you have to remember, they had enough Gene Seed to recreate 3 or 4 chapters that was stored up. They're stealing from everybody. So I truly ask here, what did he accomplish? By all rights, I see he had the advantage, and he lost it. He was fighting on his home turf. He had more troops on an average of the first 4 years than the Inquisition did. So tell me, what did he accomplish during Badab? The single greatest referenced point. Now, many of you might question why I have not included more from the post-Badab War about Huron Blackheart. And that's because, quite frankly, it's really hard to find a lot about him post-Badab War. Many Mountain Dew baptized veterans of Oldhammer might call me crazy for that. However, you have to understand how many things he actually features in. Let's take a look at the stories he appears in. He only has 1 book to his own name, unless you count the 2 Imperium armor books, which you could argue because they're about the Badab War and he's the main antagonist for the Badab War. So, 3 books. However, I'd rather focus on the books he features in. Lexiconum articles, these are the books he features in. He features in Parallax, he features in Hollow World, Uriel Ventress books, Iron Warrior books, Bitter End, and the Night Lords books. But let's take in what capacity he features in these books. In the novel Parallax, he features as a secondary character. I couldn't find much about the Hollow World, but I'm going to assume he features heavily in it. However, I'm not going to buy it because I have to have money for plastic crack. In the Uriel Ventress books, which there are 6 of this series, he features in 1 book. In the Iron Warrior books, he's seen, but he's only there for 1 book and is more of a side character. His name is thrown around a bit. In Bitter End, it's a short story about him because he gets wounded, and the other Red Corsairs have to save him. He features heavily in the Night Lords book, and he seems like a pretty chill dude there. To bring this all back around, I'm going to be honest here. I think Huron is a very well-written character and is very consistent in his personality in all of the features. But that's because he barely features in anything. If you juxtapose him to Abaddon, he barely appears. If you even juxtapose him to Uriel Ventress, or any other characters that have had their own series, he's barely featured. Even Cato Sicarius has more features than him. Allow me to express some salt here. As you may know, my favorite chapter is Ultramarines. So, while talking about the Red Corsairs, obviously I found what happened to the McCragg's honor, and I think it's very much disingenuous from the writers of GW to do what they did. But I think this is a larger issue that I would like to make a video on. But it's GW's writers not being able to pick on certain factions within Warhammer. They used the McCragg honor to attack Jagoras, the homeworld of the White Scars. Now, I think it was particular on who and why they used what they did there. They used an Ultramarine ship, which is fine because everybody hates the Ultramarines, to the White Scars, a very unpopular chapter, to highlight how strong Huron is. But if you really think about it, what significant power does he have? He has no favor from the Chaos Gods, and the Blackstone Fortress that was given to him doesn't even work. They can't move it. It does nothing. Furthermore, on online discussions, many people bring up this example of how powerful the Red Corsairs were. And this is the issue with the writers. If you read Knights of McCragg, it referenced that the McCragg honor was abandoned. And if you read the Red Corsairs book, they claim that they took it from the Ultramarines. So, if we assume one is more true than the other, that means one book is false. If we assume both are true, that means the Red Corsairs did take it, but they took it from an abandoned crew, a skeleton crew at most. So how is that a power highlight? Furthermore, people claim that they have the honor of attacking a chapter's homeworld of the first founding. They attacked Jagoras during Cadia. Now, if you read Huron's book, supposedly happens before Cadia. However, if you read the Lexiconum and other facts, it happens after Cadia. My argument would be it takes place around the same time as Cadia because time is relative in Warhammer. So what is this Huron effect I've been talking about this whole video? Well, quite frankly, I think it's a two-pronged thing. I think he's an old character from Old Hammer that a lot of people love. Which means GW can't kill him off because all the Old Hammer fans are going to get pissed off that they killed off one of their favorite antagonists. But much like many antagonists throughout media, I think he's overstayed his time. I think he's a cool character, but I think a lot of his story is based on the Badab, and the whole point of the Badab is it's Imperium versus Imperium. It's Loyalist Space Marines versus Loyalist Space Marines. A lot of key parts to Huron's character, you could argue, inspired Abaddon. When you have two characters that fill the same niche in storytelling, you're gonna oftentimes get bloat, and then people end up picking favorites. Because Huron doesn't want to be controlled by any masters, just like Abaddon doesn't want to be controlled by any masters. The community and fans want to keep him around because they like him. It reminds them of another time. He is a more consistent, well-written character. He doesn't have the whole GW constantly having to make him look like the big bad guy, comparing him to other Primarchs. However, if you put him in the War Master role, he's going to have to be compared to other Primarchs, and you just can't do that. The Astro Claws and Huron just work better as a renegade chapter, in my opinion. Something maybe like the Soul Drinkers. But that's not what we got. We got the Red Corsairs, who are honestly just a popular warband for people to play. People like Old Hammer things. They like the Old Hammer color schemes. I might have come across in the video as a salty asshole who's trying to argue his point and you're all wrong, I'm not trying to do that. I think people should like what they like. I think it's honestly reasonable, and I might have grown a bit more attached to the Badab than I ever intended before doing this, because I want to do a whole Badab battle report series right now on my channel. However, I think Huron, how he is written now, is sort of a hypocritical character. I also think a lot of it is the same issue we have with a lot of characters with GW, but because people like the older stuff, they're going to overlook it. They're going to overlook being told he's a master tactician, even though a lot of the proof goes against that. But they're not going to give that to Abaddon because he's New Hammer. They don't like the way he's written. They don't like how inconsistent he is. So therefore, they can not overlook it. I think a lot of people overlook issues with Huron. And that's the Huron effect. The fans love him so much that the company has to cover him. They have to keep on adding to him. They have to keep on giving him stuff, even though Warhammer's already really bloated because people like it. People like his lore. They like the idea of going renegade. Because that's the one thing a lot of people reference. They constantly reference the Dab War. They constantly reference when he's a renegade. But he's no longer renegade. He's chaos. They need to either move the Red Corsairs to renegade, or they can't stay chaos. There's already so much in chaos. And I'm going to get to this in another video. Not everything has to be chaos. And I think that's the biggest issue with Huron, is that they made him go chaos. I think there's an argument to be made that retroactively, if you were writing this, you could have retconned him being War Master instead of Abaddon and other stuff like that back in 5th edition, or before the Horus Heresy even was a thing, to try to improve the world building for Warhammer, so you don't have a bunch of characters fitting the same role. I think that's a valid argument, and I would love to see people make arguments like that, or your own version of the writing in the comment section below. I think Huron works very well as a pirate king. A character that's ambiguous, a character that isn't on one of their sides, he's there for himself. But as soon as you made them go chaos, he's serving the dark gods. It just doesn't work anymore. Anyways, thank you for letting me ramble for 30 odd minutes. Please like, comment, and share if you think any of the points are good. If you don't, laugh at me and send your friends a video to laugh at me too. Hey, by the way, side note here, the Astral Claws does not know its progenitor, and many people have different theories of who the progenitor is. My personal theory is that it's the Imperial Fist as the progenitor, but I do want to hear your theories of who their parent chapter could be.